welcome to Sunshine for Your Life. I'm going to talk to you to begin with about some climbers who tried to climb Mount Everest but failed. There was a group of climbers and they wanted to climb Mount Everest. Now, Mount Everest may be the tallest mountain in the world. There are some people that think that it is because it's over 29,000 feet high and it's in the Asia and the Himalayas. And they ran into bad weather, and that's the reason why they failed. They had to turn back. Now, as you know, that mountains will change their weather depending upon what altitude you're climbing at. So what they did, they turned back, but they wanted to make another attempt. So they started to do speaking tours, giving pictures of Mount Everest and talking about their climb and why they failed and how they wanted to do it again. So it was regular presentations that they did in various places. And in one of those presentations, the main speaker, shook his fist at the picture of Mount Everest on the wall. And what he said was this: Everest, we are going to conquer you someday because you are not going to get any bigger, but we are. And that was his statement. You won't be bigger, but we will get better, and we will get bigger. Now, the state of Colorado has more than 50 mountains that are over 14,000 feet high. And some people make a hobby as to climbing all of those 50 mountains, actually more than 50 mountains, and they want to climb every one of them that's 14,000 feet high. Mountains do inspire us. They're beautiful, but they can be treacherous, and the weather can change due to the altitude, as I said before. Now, Jesus climbed mountains, and the disciples climbed mountains. And I'm going to start by reading Matthew 14:23, and I'm reading it from the King James Version, and this is what it says. He went up into a mountain apart to pray, and when the evening was come, he was there alone. Let me read that again. He went up into a mountain apart to pray, and when the evening was come, he was there alone. Now, Jesus spent a lot of times climbing mountains and praying, taking his disciples to one side to teach them. He went into the Mount of Beatitudes and the Mountain of Temptation. And so he was used to climbing mountains, and a lot of times he did that because he wanted to be alone and he wanted to pray. Now, in the Old Testament, there was a prophet whose name was Elijah. He did a lot of wonderful things for God. He did a lot of miracles for God. And there was also, at the same time, an evil king whose name was Ahab, and his wife's name was Jezebel. We hear about Jezebel occasionally, how bad she was, but she was real, and she was married to Ahab, and he was an evil king. So Jezebel and Ahab practiced an evil religion, which was called Baal. And one of the reasons it was so bad, and I won't go into it completely, but they sacrificed children. They actually put children on an altar and killed them. This was part of the worship that they had of Baal. And so Elijah, who was God's prophet, had a confrontation with the prophets of Baal, because the Baal was a religion, but there were a lot of prophets who practiced it. He went up to Mount Carmel and had a confrontation with them, and of course he won. Now, this is a high mountain too, so I want to show you Mount Carmel just so that you'll understand what I'm talking about and where its location is. So here I have a map of Israel, and I'm just going to point out to begin with some places that would be more familiar to you if you've been, or even if you haven't, because you see it on maps all the time. We hear about people in the Golan Heights. Most people, if they're tourists, never get a chance to go on Golan Heights because Syria is right there. I have been able to get up there once. This is the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River. It empties into the Dead Sea. This is the West Bank right here. You have Jerusalem right here, that's top little dot, and you have Bethlehem, which is the bottom little dot. They're only 6 miles from each other. I used to take a taxi back and forth. This is the Negev Desert. This is the Sinai. In this area would be Egypt and the Nile River, the Gaza Strip, the city of Haifa, which is a major port city, And right below Haifa is Mount Carmel. It's right here, right on the Mediterranean Sea. And this is where the confrontation occurred between the prophets of Baal and Elijah. This is all the Mediterranean Sea. You have Tel Aviv, which is also a major city. If you go up to Mount Carmel, which I've been actually 2 or 3 times, you can look down and see the Mediterranean, and you can look down and you can see Tel Aviv. I was able to do that too. It is a very, very high mountain. It's not as high as the mountains that that the climbers were trying to reach, but it is a very, very high mountain. And when you go up to Mount Carmel, it's an interesting experience because you go straight. It feels like you're going straight and you're going up, and there's no real low angle. It's like you're going straight up, and you keep going and going and going and going. And so it's very interesting to be on Mount Carmel. And I'm not going into it today, although I'd like to at some point. But the reason that all of the things happened on Mount Carmel that did happen for Elijah to beat the prophets of Baal is the way that the mountain is constructed, the way that the geology is constructed, the way that the sand is, the size of the stones, the fact that it has water. It made everything that the Bible talks about in terms of Mount Carmel a physical possibility. Carmel is actually 1,818 feet high. So in comparison to Everest, it wouldn't be very high. But the problem is, if you're going on it, it just goes straight up. It's very, very difficult to climb. I went up by bus, of course, with a group of other people, and we were all kind of sitting there white-knuckled because of the fact that we wondered if we were actually going to tip backwards because of the fact of the elevation and the angle that you go up. So at any rate, Elijah, of course, and God won on this confrontation, and all of the prophets of Baal were killed. Well, this made Jezebel so angry that she threatened Elijah's life. He became afraid and he ran away. He even asked God to take his life because he was in such danger from her. But of course, God wouldn't do that. He became afraid. He ran away. And it's interesting to see, and this is what I want to focus on, how God treated him when he was so frightened he ran away. Remember, you have hundreds of prophets of Baal. They were all killed. And then they hadn't had rain for about 3 years. And so Elijah asked for rain, and he saw this little black cloud in the sky, and he knew that they were going to have tremendous rain because God was answering his prayer. And so he ran ahead of the chariot 17 miles. He ran down Mount Carmel and actually beat out the chariots that were coming down to Mount Carmel because he knew that rain was coming and it was going to be a very, very heavy rain. So he was afraid, though. He'd run out of steam. He'd run out of energy. And I think the same thing happens to us. Once we've done something that's taken an awful lot of energy, we run out of steam. And sometimes if we get overtired, what's going to happen is that we're going to start being afraid. We're going to start getting depressed. We're going to be overtired, and we're going to say things that we don't mean, and we're going to say things that aren't good. Take my life. This is what Elijah said. I've had it. I've done so much. I've done these miracles. I've defeated the prophet of Baal. But now I'm completely out of energy. I can't do this anymore. Take my life. My life is over. But of course, God didn't allow for that. He had more work to do. I think we have to realize, excuse me, that just because we're depressed or just because various things have happened to us, it doesn't mean our work is over. Just because we're in a dry spell or we don't feel well, it doesn't mean that our life is over. Our life is still going on. So what happened was God provided him for the things he needed. He gave him food. He gave him water. He gave him a shade tree. He could sleep under the shade tree. He took care of him. In other words, he gave him the rest that he needed so he would be able to go forward. So he was able to go forward with God's help. And what I want to point out is God didn't judge him because he was discouraged. God didn't judge him because he was depressed. He met his needs. He took care of him. He gave him the rest that he needed. And then afterwards, he sent him forward because there were other works that he needed to do. He sent him forward to actually anoint a new king. So therefore, his life wasn't over. I guess the really things that I really want to point out to you is that there are going to be times when you think you've had it, you can't go any further, you've done everything you can do, and you just don't want to continue. And you might not say, God, take away my life. You might say, I just want an extended vacation. I want to get out of here. I want to be gone for 2 or 3 months, and we'll see how I feel after that. But what you can expect from God is that he's going to take care of you, and he's not going to judge you for being a human being. You are, as a human being, going to have these thoughts of, I wished I could back out. I don't want to go forward. I'm in this too deep. It's demanding too much of me. You know, I've taught for years and years and years, and thank heavens for summer vacations, because by the end of a school year, you may well feel that you don't want to do this anymore. I know I came to a point in teaching when I decided I was going to be a social worker, and I actually went and I took the test and I passed the test, and then something drew me back to the teaching. I never did leave teaching, but I had thought about doing other things. And in the end, I always taught, but I also had a counseling center for over 20 years. It was my own counseling practice, and I helped out with 2 other people, 2 other agencies and their counseling practices. So you can get to a point where you just really want to change, and God may give you that change, or he'll give you the rest, or he'll take care of you in some kind of way depending upon what your needs are, so that you can go forth. Now I'm going to read another verse here, Philippians 1 verse 6, and I am going to read it from the King James Version, and this is what it says. He which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. Let me read that again. He which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. Now, actually, what does that mean? Well, it means that when you've started something for God, he's going to complete that work in you. You're not doing your work alone. You really are not doing your work alone. He is working in you. The Holy Spirit resides in you. Remember, we are the temple of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit resides in you, and he will complete the work in you. If you had to do it by yourself, if you had to do everything by yourself, and you didn't have the help of the Holy Spirit, if you're a Christian, or you didn't have the help of other people that God sent to help you, then you would just be out of it fairly quickly, because you couldn't maintain it. It takes a lot of energy to follow God. It takes a lot of energy to fulfill a calling, and you have to be very careful about it. You have to be steadfast about it. You have to do your preparatory work. You know, I say to people, I never entered a class without being prepared. There was only 2 times I ever went into a class and I wasn't prepared in advance. And those 2 times were because I didn't know I was going to be teaching. At the last minute, somebody came up to me, Pat, would you fill in for me? I've got to do this or that or the other. And so I did, and I had to do it without preparation because there wasn't any time for preparation, because I didn't even know I was going to be called on to teach. But even so, in one class I went in and I was prepared for it, and a student said, we're going to take exams. No one's ever taught us about this aspect of psychology. Will you teach that to us today? I had been prepared to do something else. So I stopped what I was going to do, and I fulfilled their needs and taught them, just off the top of my head, what I knew about a certain area that they were going to have difficulty with on a test. And I did that, and I'm glad I did, because it helped them out. But every other time that I've ever taught, I've always been prepared. I've never walked into a class unprepared. So you have to stop to think of the work that's involved, and it is very arduous, and it is very time-consuming, and you do the best you can with it. You're not going to be perfect, but you do the best you can with it. And after a time, you can get worn out. And you can think, well, gee, do I want to do this anymore? But God will always take care of you, and if you're supposed to continue, he will let you know that. He is not going to take anything away from you that he wants you to do. Your call is not going to be changed unless he wants you in another area. So it is important that you follow God. Now, I am going to read Mark 11:23 in the King James Version. And this is what it says. And then I'm going to read it again on another version later. So this will be Mark 11:23. And this is what it says in the King James Version. Whoever shall say unto this mountain, be thou removed, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe, he shall have whatsoever he saith. Let me read that again. Whoever shall say unto this mountain, be thou removed, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe, he shall have whatever he saith. That is quite a verse. If you believe, if God has told you to do something and you believe, then it will come to pass. Because of your faith, it will come to pass. Now, I'm going to read another version of it. It comes from the NIR version. This will not be on the screen, and it will be longer because I'm including a second verse. I'm including verse 23 and 24. Mark 11:23-24 from the NIRV, and this is what it says. What I'm about to tell you is true. Suppose one of you says to this mountain, go and throw yourself into the sea. You must not doubt in your heart. You must believe that what you will say will happen. Then it will be done for you. And to go on to verse 24, it says this. So I tell you, when you pray for something, believe that you have already received it. Then it will be yours. I want to repeat that last part, verse 24. So I tell you, when you pray for something, believe that you have already received it. Then it will be yours. Now, that's a very important verse. These verses are very important because they bolster your faith. You ask for something and you believe that you have it. Now, it's up to God's discretion where he actually gives you something you ask for or not. He's not going to give you something that's going to harm you or something that's not in his will. But if you're working for him and you want to pray in accordance to his will, he will shape your heart and your desires so you will ask what he wants you to have anyway, and then he gives it to you. Now, mountains usually don't go straight up and down. If you look at a mountain, and I have done a little mountain climbing, not a whole lot, but some, and it's something that I took note of, and something that I teach when I talk about anything that has to do with geology and mountains. A mountain does not go straight up and down. There are a few that do, where you have these shears of rock, but most of them don't go up and down straight. They go up, they level off. They go up, they level off. And when you climb a mountain, you watch for it and you'll see. Because when I climbed the mountain that I climbed it with one of my students. I went up, and then there was a period of where we just walked on flat land. And then we went back up and we walked on flat land. It's like a step arrangement, up and level, up and level. Most mountains are like that. And our lives are kind of like that, too, if you stop to think of it. We'll have a crisis, it'll resolve, we'll be fine for a while. We'll have another crisis, it'll resolve, we'll be fine for a while. And there it goes, up and level, up and level. And this is the way our lives are, and this is the way mountains are. So we will go from one crisis to another, each crisis being resolved as God leads us to resolve it, or as he resolves it himself. You don't see the top of a mountain because of the vegetation, because of the trees. And when you look at a mountain from the bottom, it just looks like it's going straight up and down, kind of slanted, but straight up and down. But mountains are made to be climbed, and we do climb them. Everest has been climbed, and so I imagine those climbers went back and did succeed. But Jesus climbed mountains too. He went up the Mount of Olives, he went up to the Mount of Beatitudes, he went up to the Mount of Transfiguration. So he was used to mountains. And if you go to the Middle East, And if you head for Jerusalem and some of the areas in Israel, you'll see all of these mountain ranges around you, and they're there. Life is not flat. The earth is not flat. And when you have finished climbing your mountain, you will have your legacy. Whatever it is that you have to do, that you need to do for God, think of it kind of like a mountain that you have to climb. When you finish it, then you will have done what you need to do. You will have your legacy. You will be rewarded. Your legacy will be complete. And you can praise God because it's due to His work that you're on the mountain to begin with. So I'm going to close it here, and we'll do something else next time. Please join me then.